These 2 centuries, he thinks, are basically understood as a period where we have a deepening understanding, not of nature or morality, but rather one in which there occurred an astonishingly rapid progress of sentiments, in which it's become easier for us to be moved by sad and sentimental stories. In other words, the sentimental thesis basically says that we are more moved by stories about the suffering of others than we were before, and Rorty doesn't explain why that is a cause of action. I'm going to explain this to you. But the core of this is this thing of sentiment. Is that, yeah.
Is it because of rationality, new ideas about rationality and morality that make us?
Sorry?
Or is it because of new ideas about morality?
No, he says it's not a period of deepening understanding of the nature of rationality or morality.
Is it because of those that make us?
It's because of what?
Is it because of these ideas that make us wonder?
It's because of...
These ideas that make us wonder?
No, what I want to say is because but rather in which an astonishing rapid progress of sentiments. Which he says rationality, the reasons for being good to people, there's no new moral invention in the late 18th century. He says, aha, we need to be good to people at a distance. Right? Yeah.
Was it the availability of communication and being able to get...
Exactly, and that's what I want to talk to you about today. A history of the communication, this, a history of literary forms in which it's conveyed, a history of art. That's what I want to talk to you about.
Because obviously feelings and sentiments more expensive.
That's exactly right. You got it. You hear this? The point is, feelings don't just exist in the world. They exist sort of through communications, through literature, through art, through other things. And that's what today's lecture is about. Yeah.
So is it more that people are just aware that other people were suffering? Or is it
Well, they're not just aware of it. They're going to be aware of it, and they're going to feel they can do something about it, and they're organized to be aware of it. That's what the lecture is about. The questions you're asking are exactly the right questions, but that's what I'm going to try to explain to you. Okay? I mean... we're just starting with the feeling, and then let's, okay, so you have a feeling, now what? Yeah.
I guess I'll wait to your lecture then.
Sorry?
I guess I'll wait to your lecture then.
Can you wait?
I have a question in a similar vein, so I'll just wait.
Can you wait? If you're not, we'll leave plenty of time if you're not convinced by the as we go along, okay? Because I totally agree with you, it doesn't work, this doesn't happen miraculously. And that's exact, you got it. And so we're trying to talk about how it happens. Okay. Let's look at why this happens. Let's put it into an intellectual context. Well, first, in the 18th century context, there is a tremendous interest in morality being based on feeling. In fact, there's a notion that there is actually a physiology of sympathy. What does sympathy mean? Sympathy comes from the Greek with, and from sim, and from pathia, or suffering or feeling. So sympathy is a sense of feeling with someone, to have corresponding feelings. I'm using sympathy also to include what we think of as empathy, which is a 20th century word, which is not just to feel with someone, but also in a more cognitive sense, to feel yourself into someone else. And I'm so much not interested in the philosophical difference between feeling with someone and feeling as if one were someone. But my point is only that your feelings sort of connect with the feelings of others in this sympathy. I mean, it's the same root as like symphony, right? A sound that's sympathetic. Okay, so that's a key notion, and it's understood almost to be sort of physiological. So let me quote to you from one of the most important 18th century texts on this subject. He says, human nature is constituted he wants to argue with this man Wollaston, W-O. You don't need to remember this, but just in case you want to follow it. His name is William Wollaston. So he says that we are sort of built in as a species to have this feeling, to have a feeling for other people, such that it renders us obnoxious to the pains of others, causes us to sympathize with them, and almost comprehend us in their case, make us feel as if we're in. The reaction then is direct, and it's in a response to an actual present distress. It's grievous to hear, or almost to hear, any man, or even any animal who's in torment. Now, modern cognitive physiology actually sort of buys into all of that, though it doesn't claim it was a moral consequence. Babies will feel empathic to another baby crying. We do experiments with chimpanzees who react to other chimpanzees in distress. So there does seem to be we now know, a kind of neurophysiological sense that the pain of others causes something, causing something in us. How that gets to action is another question. But I just want to suggest, first of all, that in the 18th century, the period we're trying to explain something happening, there is this view that sympathy is built in as a human quality. Point one. Point two, and that gets to the communications. The 18th century is the great century of the novel. There are some earlier versions for the novel, but basically the novel is an 18th century, late 18th century genre. So what are novels about? When you guys say, I sort of started reading a novel, I liked it, what do you say? What's the word you say? I got into the novel, right? You get into it is the word you say. Getting into it means you're thinking yourself into the characters of the novel. You become sympathetic with them. When something bad happens to them, you feel bad. When they die, you feel really bad. When the boy gets girl or girl gets boy, usually you feel good if it's the right boy and girl, right? So you're involved with these novels. Now, the thing about the novel, novels are they're very much about feelings. They're about falling in love is the most important feeling probably, and the difficulties of getting boy and girl together. But they're also just in their form make you feel like you're getting into the life of someone else. In other words, many of the early novels were so-called epistolary novels, in which the author pretended that you were reading the letters of one of the characters. So you actually did sort of get into the person in the sense that you're into the most intimate lives of the person by reading their letters. Or they're in the form, like Robinson Crusoe, of a first-person true story. So you think it's actually really happened when we know it didn't really happen. Right? So the form of the novel, as a form, is such that it gets you into sympathy with its characters, and sometimes the novel is with its narrator. Is that all right? So the novel is actually a genre that makes you want to feel with someone. And the people it makes you want to feel with are ordinary people like us. These are not the tragic figures of Greek drama or Shakespearean drama. These are regular people. They die in bed. They fall in love in trivial ways. So that's the second point. So what I want to suggest then so far, is we have a point where it seems that the first point, this sort of neurophysiology of sympathy, which has a sort of moral consequence, meets culture or meets a form. So what we in fact start seeing in the 18th century is people feeling very squeamish about things that they never felt squeamish before. One of the great examples of this in European literature, is the case of I think I showed you a picture of this before, the torture and execution of a would-be regicide, someone who tries to kill Louis XV. And this was advertised as that the day would be hard. The day was hard, and they tortured this man to death in the most gruesome way. They drew him and quartered him, they poured boiling oil in it. It was horrible. Now, this was a standard, not everyday event, but these kinds of public tortures were, as you saw in some of the pictures, not totally uncommon. In one's lifetime, one lived in a city, one is likely to have seen this a couple times. Now, if you were to see this, or go further back, if you were to go to a Roman gladiatorial game, I suspect you would find it unbearable. You just could not watch it, I would guess. But we know that people in the past did watch it and actually seemed to find pleasure from it. And we also knew that people watched these horrible executions and found pleasure from it. Now, what happens in the period of Damien is we have a great deal of evidence, people saying, I couldn't bear to watch this. And they start weeping, and they start leaving, and they start writing to each other saying, we can't possibly present this kind of stuff in public. It's too horrible. So we do have something happening already.